November 24, 1944. Northfield, Tinian, and Elliefield, Saipan. The 21st Bomber Command dispatches 111 Boeing B-29 Superfortresses on a mission toward the Japanese heartland. On Guam, Brigadier General H. Hansel oversees the American Strategic Bombing Force from his command center, orchestrating a campaign that will redefine the nature of aerial warfare in the Pacific. The fleet of gleaming bombers carries a total of 277 tons of ordnance. Their target, the Musashino engine plant of the Nakajima Aircraft Company, located on the outskirts of Tokyo. What Japanese fighter pilots encounter on this morning will fundamentally alter their perception of air combat, exposing a technological chasm so vast that even the most valiant efforts, the greatest courage, or the strongest resolve cannot bridge it. Captain Tatsuo Yamada tightens the strap of his oxygen mask inside the cockpit of his Kawasaki Ki-61 Hien at Chofu Airfield, just west of Tokyo. The morning's briefing stressed the necessity of gaining superior altitude to intercept incoming enemy formations. Intelligence reports have confirmed the presence of large, four-engine bombers operating from newly established airfields on the Mariana Islands, flying at altitudes far beyond anything previously observed. Yamada volunteers for the high-altitude interception role, fully aware that the mission will be grueling, facing an adversary whose capabilities remain shrouded in uncertainty. His aircraft is armed with four 12.7mm machine guns and two 20mm cannons, weapons optimized for engagements at medium altitudes, where Japanese fighters had historically performed well. The challenge of high-altitude combat had first emerged during early 1944, when Japanese pilots encountered American B-24 Liberators and older B-17 Flying Fortresses over China. Those bombers typically operated between 20,000 and 25,000 feet altitudes Japanese interceptors could reach. In response, Major Tishi Meda had developed specialized climbing techniques, emphasizing the importance of reaching optimal altitude before engaging, rather than attempting to climb mid-combat. A pilot already at height held a decisive energy advantage, capable of overcoming even the most formidable defensive armament. But this morning's intelligence suggests these new bombers are flying much higher, far beyond the reach of known doctrine. The 21st Bomber Command stands as America's most formidable strategic air arm in the Pacific since the Doolittle Raid in 1942. Over time, it will grow to encompass more than 1,000 aircraft, operating from 5 sprawling airfields across Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. These bombers feature pressurized cabins, an innovation specifically engineered for long-range, high-altitude missions across the vast Pacific expanse. This design philosophy marks a radical departure from earlier American bombers. The B-17 and B-24 relied on unpressurized crew compartments, forcing crews to wear bulky flight suits and depend on oxygen masks, which severely restricted their effective ceiling to around 25,000 feet. In contrast, American engineers prioritized altitude performance in the B-29, embracing mechanical complexity to secure a sanctuary above enemy interceptors. The pressurization system allows crew members to work in relative comfort, wearing regular shirts, at altitudes where unpressurized aircraft would leave their crews battling cold, fatigue, and oxygen deprivation. Yamada's formation consists of Ki-61 seconds from the elite 244th Sentai and Nakajima Ki-44 Shoki interceptors from the 47th Sentai, launching in a desperate climb from multiple airfields ringing Tokyo. The Japanese pilots watch as contrails form in the upper atmosphere, tracing the approach of American bombers from the southeast. Radar installations at the Chiba Early Warning Station detect the incoming formation at altitudes ranging from 27,000 to 31,000 feet, adjusting slightly to navigate weather systems. Ground controllers direct the defending fighters toward the threat axis, but the interceptors struggle to reach even 25,000 feet before the bombers pass overhead. The disparity in technology becomes instantly apparent as the two forces finally converge, or rather, fail to converge. Yamada is flying an aircraft designed in 1941 for medium-altitude combat against Chinese and early Pacific adversaries. His Ki-61 weighs 7,650 pounds and is powered by a 1,175 horsepower Kawasaki Ha-40 liquid-cooled engine capable of a maximum speed of 368 miles per hour at 16,400 feet. While its specifications list a service ceiling of 36,000 feet, in actual combat conditions, performance deteriorates sharply above 28,000 feet. The engine loses significant power in the thin air, and control surfaces grow increasingly sluggish. Self-sealing fuel tanks and pilot armor, added after combat experience, increase weight and further degrade climb performance. The key 44 Shoki interceptors from the 47th Sentai attempt to close the gap, aiming for the bomber formation that hovers between 27,000 and 30,000 feet, depending on atmospheric conditions. These aircraft, purpose-built for high-altitude interception with superior climb rates, still fight a losing battle in the rarefied atmosphere. Their engines overheat, producing only a fraction of their sea-level power, while pilots gasp through oxygen systems never designed for prolonged high-altitude flight. Most interceptors manage to reach 28,000 feet before beginning to stall, still thousands of feet short of many bombers. The few that manage to get close lack the energy for sustained engagement. Controls respond weakly, engines scream beyond their design limits, and the air itself offers little resistance. The B-29 seconds, in stark contrast, maintain tight formation at their operational altitude. Their crews work in pressurized compartments, unencumbered by heavy flight suits or restrictive oxygen masks, a luxury denied to earlier bomber generations. Captain Robert Morgan commands the lead Superfortress, Dauntless Dottie, while his navigator, Captain Theodore Van Zerk, locks on to the primary target through the Norden bombsight. Each of the B-29's 4 Wright R-3350 engines produces 2,200 horsepower, maintaining a true airspeed over 300 miles per hour even in the thin air. Turbo-superchargers compress the thin atmosphere, sustaining engine power where naturally aspirated engines falter. The pressurized compartments are connected by a tunnel over the bomb bay, allowing crew members to move freely between stations without needing pressure suits. This innovation enables operations at altitudes previously unimaginable for combat aircraft. The central fire control system uses analog computers to coordinate defensive armament, tracking multiple targets simultaneously, while gunners fire from comfortable, enclosed positions. Yamada pushes his Key 61 to its absolute limit, the airspeed indicator hovering around 180 miles per hour as the fighter wallows in the thin air near 30,000 feet. His pre-war training never accounted for combat at such heights. The mission plan called for diving attacks from above to preserve kinetic energy, but reaching a position above the bombers is now a fantasy. Japanese doctrine, honed against unescorted B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds, flying at moderate altitudes, is rendered obsolete. The Heian holds at 30,000 feet for mere seconds before stalling, forcing a recovery that costs 3,000 feet of altitude. Repeated attempts yield the same result. Engine temperatures spike into the red zone, oil pressure fluctuates dangerously, and the aircraft struggles to maintain control. Yamada watches as bomber contrails pass silently overhead, their defensive turrets tracking his fighter but holding fire he is simply too far away. The altitude gap prevents any meaningful engagement, no matter how desperately the Japanese pilots strive. On this morning, only 40 Japanese fighters manage to make any attack on the bomber stream, and most achieve just a single firing pass before losing energy. Machine gun rounds, fired in climbing attacks, lose velocity rapidly in the thin air, often falling short of their targets. The few fighters that reach effective firing range lack the energy for sustained combat, delivering only brief bursts before stalling away. Anti-aircraft shells explode thousands of feet below the bombers, despite being fired at maximum elevation. Even Japan's largest anti-aircraft guns, theoretically capable of reaching 30,000 feet, prove nearly impossible to aim accurately at such altitudes. The November 24th raid marks the first major B-29 assault on Tokyo since the symbolic Doolittle raid 31 months earlier. The formation holds its course toward the Nakajima Musashino engine plant, Japan's most vital aircraft engine manufacturing facility. Chief Bombardier Lieutenant Coleman releases his bombs on signal, followed by other aircraft dropping in sequence from their varying altitudes. Due to the discovery of powerful jet stream winds exceeding 200 miles per hour at altitude, only 24 aircraft hit the primary target, with others diverting to secondary objectives or missing entirely. Yet the psychological impact is profound. Bombs fall from an altitude never before seen, while Japanese fighters circle helplessly below, unable to reach the attackers. Ground observers stare skyward at vapor trails, streaking across Tokyo's skies at previously inconceivable heights, beyond the reach of any defense. Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka coordinates fighter operations from sector control, receiving frustrated reports from interceptor squadrons. Pilots report engines failing, controls becoming unresponsive, and the inability to maintain the altitude required for interception. The bombers pass through Japanese airspace, suffering only a single loss, a B-29 destroyed in a suicidal ramming attack by a damaged fighter. Most defending pilots burn fuel in vain climbs, returning to base without ever coming within firing range. The display of technological superiority stuns both Japanese military leaders and pilots. The 21st Bomber Command completes its first Tokyo mission with minimal damage from enemy defenses, though mechanical failures force several B-29 seconds to divert or ditch in the Pacific. Japanese fighters claim only one confirmed kill by ramming, while bomber gunners report downing 5 enemy aircraft. The altitude sanctuary contradicts every Japanese assumption, rooted in experiences intercepting lower-flying bombers from Chinese bases. This operational failure stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of American bomber capabilities and the revolutionary nature of the B-29's design. Lieutenant Commander Minoru Genda monitors B-29 operations from Naval Headquarters, analyzing the Army's fighter failures with growing alarm. His intelligence reports emphasize the unprecedented altitude of the bombers, which exceeds Japanese interceptor capability by a significant margin. Even the Navy's newest fighters cannot effectively engage at such heights. The strategic implications are clear. Entirely new aircraft designs or alternative defensive strategies are required. But Japan lacks the time, resources, and industrial capacity for such development. The intelligence failure reflects a lack of technical understanding about American pressurization technology and turbo-supercharged engines, innovations that had transformed high-altitude operations. Japanese planners had assumed enemy bombers would operate below 25,000 feet, based on all prior experience. The B-29's pressurized cabin concept remained poorly understood by imperial military analysts, who failed to grasp its implications for combat effectiveness. Previous American bombers, operating from China, flew at altitudes Japanese fighters could reach, reinforcing these assumptions. December 3, 1944, brings another concentrated B-29 raid on Tokyo, with 86 aircraft targeting the Musashino plant once again. The Japanese response evolves in light of the November failure. Captain Teruhiko Kobayashi of the elite 244th Sentai implements new tactics, positioning his fighters at maximum altitude before the bombers arrive, hoping to dive on them with energy advantage. But even starting from optimal positions, the key 61 seconds cannot reach bomber altitude. The formation includes specially modified interceptors, stripped of armor, radios, and excess ammunition to reduce weight. These lightened fighters achieve marginally better performance, but still fall short of effective engagement height. Lieutenant Saburo Hayashi leads a specialized ramming unit called Hagakure Tai, composed of volunteer pilots willing to sacrifice their lives. Their aircraft are stripped of all non-essential equipment, including most armament and armor, carrying only enough fuel for a one-way mission to maximize climb potential. The modified key 61 seconds climb toward the bomber stream with emergency boost engaged, accepting inevitable engine damage. Manifold pressure exceeds design limits, cylinder head temperatures soar, and pilots pre-breathe pure oxygen for 30 minutes before takeoff. Yet even with these extreme measures, most fighters stall around 30,000 feet, still below effective engagement altitude. Sergeant Masawaki reaches 31,500 feet in his lightened key 61, before attempting a ramming attack on a straggling B-29. The bomber's defensive guns open fire as the fighter climbs in a final zoom. Multiple .50 caliber rounds strike the key 61, but the pilot maintains his course. At the last moment, energy fades. He stalls 500 feet below the target and enters an uncontrollable spin. He recovers at 20,000 feet, but his aircraft is too damaged and out of fuel to attempt another climb. Ramming attacks achieve occasional successes when bombers descend due to mechanical issues, but they cannot systematically counter the high-altitude threat. Throughout December 1944, B-29 losses remain minimal, while Japanese cities begin to suffer the effects of strategic bombing. Defending pilots experience deep frustration, watching their homeland burn while powerless to intervene. The traditional samurai spirit proves meaningless against technological barriers that prevent even the possibility of combat. Pilots report feelings of helplessness and shame, not from fear of death, but from their inability to protect Japan despite their willingness to die. Major General Curtis LeMay assumes command of the 21st Bomber Command in January 1945. Analyzing the effectiveness of high-altitude daylight raids, with his characteristic rigor, initial missions achieve poor accuracy due to the jet stream winds, sometimes exceeding 250 miles per hour, which push bombers rapidly across targets, making precision bombing nearly impossible. Navigation is difficult. Bombs drift miles from intended targets, regardless of bombardier skill, and winter cloud cover frequently obscures objectives, forcing radar-guided bombing with minimal precision. Less than 10% of bombs hit their intended targets. LeMay faces pressure from Washington to improve results. After careful analysis, he implements a revolutionary shift in March 1945: low-altitude night incendiary attacks against urban centers. This decision transforms the air war over Japan. B-29 seconds strip defensive armament except for tail guns, carrying maximum incendiary bomb loads. The reduction in altitude from 30,000 feet to between 5,000 and 9,000 feet eliminates the jet stream problem, while bringing bombers within range of Japanese defenses. The tactical shift suddenly allows Japanese fighters to achieve interception altitude, fundamentally changing the dynamics of combat. On March 9, 1945, Operation Meeting House became a major turning point in the air campaign over Japan. The mission introduced a new phase in strategic bombing, changing how large-scale air operations were conducted for the remainder of the war. A formation of 334 B-29 Superfortresses approached at altitudes between 5,000 and 9,000 feet, finally within range of Japan's defending aircraft. The nighttime conditions and the unexpected change in Allied flight tactics initially created confusion among Japanese defenses. Lieutenant Yoshio Mitsuyoshi took off in his Nakajima Ki-44 from Matsudo Airfield, now capable of reaching the same altitude as the bombers. However, night operations proved challenging. Without radar or close ground coordination, pilots found it difficult to locate their targets. Searchlights and anti-aircraft units attempted to guide defensive efforts, while small groups of fighters made individual interception runs, often without radio contact or formation support. The B-29 seconds showed strong endurance and stability during the mission. Their radar-assisted defensive systems helped maintain formation and complete objectives, despite significant resistance. Japanese pilots, most of whom were trained for daytime engagements, faced unfamiliar conditions in the dark skies. The operation caused large-scale fires throughout Tokyo, resulting in severe urban damage across about 16 square miles. It became one of the most impactful air missions of the war, demonstrating both the scale of modern aerial warfare and its far-reaching consequences. Japanese forces reported several bomber losses, but were unable to fully contain the effects of the attack. Although the lower altitude allowed some defensive response, the combination of darkness, surprise tactics, and the large number of aircraft limited the effectiveness of interception. Operation Meeting House ultimately influenced future air strategies, shaping how later missions would be planned and executed. The tactical shift invalidates years of Japanese high-altitude interceptor development. Resources poured into high-altitude engines and pressurization research become irrelevant overnight. Imperial Navy Lieutenant Sadamu Kumachi flies the new Mitsubishi J-2M Raiden interceptor during B-29 raids over Nagoya in early 1945. The Raiden's supercharged engine gives it a theoretical ceiling of 36,000 feet, sufficient to engage B-29 seconds. But, in practice, combat at extreme altitude is nearly impossible. Even when fighters can reach bomber height, controls respond sluggishly, the engine produces minimal power despite supercharging, and pilots struggle to maintain pursuit curves or lead targets effectively in the thin air. Fighters lack the performance for sustained engagement. The Raiden requires perfect positioning before the bombers arrive to attempt even a single firing pass. Climbing from below after the bombers pass overhead is impossible. Many pilots suffer oxygen system failures, leading to disorientation or unconsciousness. The few successful interceptions occur against damaged stragglers descending from formation, not against healthy bombers at operational altitude. April 1945 brings coordinated kamikaze attacks against B-29 formations. As conventional interception continues to fail, the Japanese military formally organizes special attack units dedicated to ramming B-29 seconds. Corporal Koshi Ogawa successfully rams a B-29 over Kawasaki on April 12, destroying both aircraft. That same day, one of the most celebrated acts of heroism in B-29 history unfolds. Staff Sergeant Henry Irwin earns the Medal of Honor when a phosphorus flare explodes prematurely in his aircraft, burning through his face and body, destroying his nose, and blinding him. Despite horrific injuries, Irwin carries the flaming device through the bomber to the cockpit window, saving 11 crew members. His sacrifice embodies the courage displayed by both sides. Despite the overwhelming technological imbalance, special attack units form at multiple bases, with pilots volunteering for certain death missions. These ramming attacks achieve limited success, destroying perhaps 10 B-29 seconds throughout the war, a tiny fraction of the bomber force. The psychological impact on American crews outweighs the tactical results, as they now know enemy pilots may deliberately crash into them. Yet even successful ramming attacks cannot significantly disrupt the bombing campaign. The B-29's central fire control system represented a major advancement in defensive technology during the war. Despite having fewer gun positions than the earlier B-17 model, its computer-assisted turrets could track several targets at once with impressive precision. Gunners operated from pressurized compartments rather than exposed stations, improving both accuracy and crew safety. Japanese pilots noted the unusually precise nature of the defensive systems, which maintained target tracking even during complex maneuvers. The remote control design also meant that the system could continue functioning even if individual components were affected. Unlike earlier aircraft, where the loss of a single gun position could reduce defensive coverage, the B-29's integrated system ensured continuous protection. This technological improvement, combined with its ability to operate at high altitude, gave the bomber a significant operational advantage during long-range missions. The arrival of P-51 Mustang escorts from Iwo Jima in April 1945 further alters the tactical landscape. These long-range fighters establish air superiority over Japan, making daylight B-29 operations even safer. Japanese interceptors must now fight through aggressive escort fighters before even attempting to reach the bombers. The few that penetrate the screen find themselves pursued while trying to position for an attack. Captain Yasuhiko Kuroda commands the 64th Sentai, equipped with the new Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate, Japan's most advanced fighter. The Ki-84 achieves better altitude performance than earlier models, with a service ceiling of 34,450 feet under ideal conditions. Sustained altitude reaches about 32,000 feet, with reduced armament and minimal fuel. Pilots report adequate performance up to 28,000 feet before power drops sharply. The Ha-45 engine, though powerful at medium altitudes, lacks effective supercharging for extreme heights. Ki-84 seconds achieves several victories against mining missions, where B-29 seconds operate at lower altitudes over water, but high-altitude daylight missions remain largely immune. The performance gap persists, with most Ki-84 sorties failing to reach engagement altitude. June 1945 introduces the Kawasaki Ki-100, a fighter converted from Ki-61 airframes but fitted with radial engines, replacing the unreliable liquid-cooled power plants. The modification dramatically improves reliability but reduces high-altitude performance compared to inline versions. Ki-100 seconds excel against American fighters at medium altitude, proving highly maneuverable and popular with pilots, but the radial engine lacks high-altitude capability, limiting ceiling to about 32,000 feet. Pilots praise its handling but lament its inability to intercept B-29 seconds. The Ki-100 represents Japan's best operational fighter, but it arrives too late and in insufficient numbers. Throughout 1945, the Japanese aircraft industry develops various high-altitude interceptor prototypes. The Mitsubishi Ki-83 twin-engine fighter promises exceptional performance with turbo-supercharged engines. The Kawasaki Ki-102 heavy fighter carries powerful armament designed specifically for bomber destruction. But development programs suffer from material shortages, especially high-grade aluminum and special alloys needed for superchargers. Manufacturing difficulties prevent deployment before the war ends, with most prototypes destroyed in bombing raids. B-29 attacks systematically destroy aircraft factories and engine plants, eliminating production capacity. The Akashi engine works, producing Ha-40 engines for key 61 seconds, is destroyed in January 1945. The technological gap widens as American improvements outpace Japanese efforts, with each month bringing enhanced B-29 capabilities, while Japanese industry collapses. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Tibbets leads special training for atomic bomb delivery, leveraging the B-29's altitude advantage. The silver plate, B-29 seconds, strip all defensive armament except tailguns, achieving even higher operational altitudes. These modifications ensure nuclear delivery aircraft remain completely immune from interception. On August 6, 1945, when Enola Gay approaches Hiroshima at 31,600 feet, Japanese fighters launch from nearby bases but cannot reach the bomber's altitude. Lieutenant Matsuo Yasui climbs desperately in his Ki 61, reaching 29,000 feet before stalling still 2,000 feet short. Other interceptors fare no better, most failing to exceed 27,000 feet despite perfect weather. The atomic explosion occurs while fighters circle helplessly below, unable to intervene or even identify the nature of the weapon. The same failure repeats on August 9th, when Bogscar delivers the second atomic bomb over Nagasaki. Japanese radar tracks the bomber throughout its approach, providing ample warning, but multiple fighter squadrons launch and fail to reach 28,000 feet. The technological sanctuary enables the use of strategic weapons without any possibility of prevention. Post-war evaluations revealed the scale of Japan's technological and industrial challenges during the later stages of the war. The B-29's pressurized cabins allowed its crews to operate effectively at high altitudes, while its turbo-supercharged engines maintained power where opposing aircraft could not perform as efficiently. These combined engineering advantages became a determining factor in air operations. Japanese pilots consistently displayed professionalism and skill within the technical limits of their aircraft, yet the differences in available technology and production capacity were difficult to overcome. High-altitude combat required advanced materials and manufacturing capabilities. Limitations in access to specialized metals and alloys hindered the development of comparable systems. The B-29 program demonstrated the results of extensive investment in engineering, innovation, and industrial production. The campaign also highlighted how modern air warfare increasingly depended on altitude, range, and reliability factors shaped as much by technology and resources as by tactics or training. During the final stages of the war, Japanese military officials, including General Korechika Anami, acknowledged the growing challenges of homeland defense. The high-altitude performance of the B-29 effectively neutralized Japan's geographical advantages and made interception increasingly difficult. Despite tactical adjustments and determined efforts by Japanese pilots, the technological gap could not be overcome. This understanding played a role in shaping Japan's eventual decision to end hostilities. Former Ki 61 pilot Lieutenant Naoshi Kano later described the immense difficulty of high-altitude interception attempts. "We climbed as far as our engines allowed, constantly monitoring temperature gauges as they reached their limits. At those heights, the aircraft struggled to maintain control. The B-29 seconds flew far above us, distant and untouchable." Kano reflected that the experience left a lasting impression among pilots who had tried to defend their homeland under extremely challenging conditions. It served as a reminder of how technology and resources had become decisive factors in modern aerial warfare. B-29 crew member, Technical Sergeant Robert Johnson, describes watching Japanese fighters from his fire control position. "We could see them struggling upward, tiny specks growing slowly. Sometimes we saw details the red circles on wings, even the pilot's canopy. Then they'd stall and fall away, tumbling like leaves. A few fired, but rounds fell short. It was almost sad. We had every advantage: altitude, speed, firepower, armor. They had nothing but courage. And courage wasn't enough against physics." Strategic Air Command incorporates B-29 lessons into Cold War doctrine, high-altitude penetration becomes a cornerstone of strategic bomber operations. Pressurization and supercharging technology advance rapidly. The tactical advantages demonstrated over Japan influenced decades of bomber development, eventually leading to jet-powered strategic bombers operating at even greater altitudes. The Japanese aviation industry studies B-29 technology through captured aircraft and documents after surrender, recognizing multiple generations of technological gap. Pressurization systems, turbo-superchargers, remote-controlled turrets, all represent engineering feats beyond Japan's wartime capacity. The examination provides a sobering assessment of what is required to compete in modern air warfare. Veteran B-29 pilot Colonel Paul Tibbets reflects on the atomic missions. Flying above enemy fighter capability allowed precise navigation without defensive concerns. We knew they couldn't reach us. The sanctuary was absolute. They could see us, track us, but not touch us. It was like being behind bulletproof glass. Ki-84 pilot Captain Iwao Hayashi recalls the final months. Even in Japan's best fighter, reaching bomber altitude was nearly impossible. The engines sputtered above 30,000 feet. Controls felt like molasses. We'd get one pass, fire a burst, then stall. Watching them continue while our cities burned, I'll never forget that helplessness. Analysis of downed B-29 seconds reveals construction techniques far beyond Japanese capabilities. Pressurized compartments use synthetic rubber seals Japan couldn't produce. Structural reinforcements require precision welding and quality control beyond Japanese standards. Remote turret systems employ analog computers more advanced than any Japanese military equipment. Even basic components, wiring, insulation, materials are superior. Major Toshio Sakagawa commands the 244th Sentai during the B-29 offensive. My pilots were among Japan's best, yet we achieved nothing against B-29 seconds at altitude. Our combat reports all say the same thing: climbing desperately, reaching 28,000 or 29,000 feet, engines failing, controls useless. Then, watching bombers pass overhead, the defeat was complete. B-29 Bombardier Lieutenant Marcus McDilder observes Japanese attempts over Osaka. They showed incredible determination. We watched them climb for 15 or 20 minutes. Some tried zoom climbs, trading speed for height. They'd fire a few rounds, fall short, stall, and spin away. Our gunners rarely fired. The altitude was better protection than any armor. It was one-sided, determined by technology, not courage. German military attaché reports describe Luftwaffe struggles against high-altitude Allied bombers, providing context for Japan's plight. Even with superior technology, German fighters had difficulty engaging bombers above 25,000 feet. The Mi-262 jet achieved limited success, but Japan lacked the capacity to develop equivalent technology. Despite recognizing the need, attempts to copy German designs failed due to lack of materials and expertise. The technological gap proved unbridgeable. Colonel John Montgomery leads the 9th Bombardment Group from Tinian. At first, they sent up everything. By spring 1945, they'd given up on daylight high-altitude interceptions. They focused on night raids when we came low. Smart, but too late. Our altitude advantage meant we could destroy their industry, almost unopposed. Maintenance officer Captain Hiroshi Fujiwara documents chronic mechanical failures in Japanese high-altitude operations. Engine failures increased exponentially above 25,000 feet. The Ha-40 would overheat in minutes. Oil pressure dropped. Coolant boiled. Oxygen systems failed. Pilots passed out. Frostbite was common. Mechanical failures made sustained high-altitude operations impossible, no matter how hard pilots tried. B-29 engineer Staff Sergeant James Pearson monitors pressurization. We cruised at 30,000 feet, with a cabin equivalent to 8,000 feet. We worked in shirt sleeves, moving freely. Meanwhile, Japanese pilots struggled with frozen controls, bad oxygen, and engines that barely functioned. The mismatch was absolute. It wasn't a fair fight. It was barely a fight at all. Japanese radar operator Corporal Shigo Yamamoto tracks B-29 seconds. We could see them from hundreds of miles away, plenty of warning. But warning meant nothing when our planes couldn't reach them. I'd vector fighters, knowing they'd fail. Pilots would report maximum altitude, usually 27,000 or 28,000 feet, then watch bombers pass at 31,000. The frustration in their voices, heartbreaking. We had the will, but not the means. Final Japanese military assessments acknowledge complete failure against B-29 high-altitude operations. Despite geographic advantages, warrior spirit, and early warning, technological inferiority prevented effective defense. Industrial limitations made matching American technology impossible. This recognition influenced support for surrender. Lieutenant Kunihiro Tanaka flies the final interception on August 14, 1945, against a reconnaissance B-29 at 35,000 feet. His Key 100 reaches 28,000 feet before engine failure forces descent, typical of hundreds of failed attempts. The bomber proceeds unmolested, documenting atomic bomb damage. The mission symbolizes Japan's enduring inability to counter American air power. B-29 radio operator Sergeant William Ale monitors Japanese fighter control frequencies. We heard their controllers vectoring fighters, then pilots reporting they couldn't climb higher, engines overheating, losing power, sometimes anger, sometimes resignation. They knew where we were, what we were doing, but couldn't stop us. Technology determined everything. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey finds that high-altitude daylight raids suffered minimal losses to fighters less than 0.2% of over 30,000 sorties. Japanese fighters were effective only when B-29 seconds operated at lower altitudes. The statistics confirm the effectiveness of altitude sanctuary. Former Imperial Navy Commander Masatake Okumura analyzes the failure. The B-29's altitude exceeded our estimates by at least 5,000 feet. We expected 26,000 feet. When they flew above 30,000, our entire defense collapsed. We lacked time, resources, and technology. B-29 pilot Colonel Robert Robbins describes the psychological edge. Knowing they couldn't reach us changed everything. We flew straight and level, no evasive maneuvers. Bombardiers had stable platforms. Crews stayed calm. We owned the sky above 30,000 feet. Everyone knew it. Key 44 veteran Captain Yoshiro Aoyagi recalls, "Each mission brought the same humiliation. We climbed until engines failed, reached one-third the altitude needed, then watched silver contrails cross our sky. Samurai spirit meant nothing against aluminium and engineering. We were warriors with swords trying to reach the moon." General Henry Arnold evaluates the B-29 program. The campaign proved that technological superiority could determine victory without invasion. Every dollar invested paid dividends. The investment in pressurization, supercharging, and defense-shaped military aviation for decades. Japanese aircraft designer Teo Doi analyzes the Key 61's limitations. "We optimized it for 15,000, 25,000 feet. We never expected bombers above 30,000 feet. Modifying it was impossible. The engine, airframe, systems all inadequate. Starting over would take years we didn't have." Squadron leader Major Teruhiko Kobayashi, "My pilots included aces. We were competitive against other aircraft. But B-29 seconds at altitude? They might as well have been on another planet. Skill didn't matter when your aircraft couldn't reach the enemy." B-29 navigator Lieutenant Thomas Cartwright, "Working without oxygen masks or gloves meant precise navigation. Japanese navigators dealt with fogged goggles, frozen instruments, hypoxia. Our advantages multiplied in ways beyond altitude." Japanese anti-aircraft commander Colonel Hiroshi Yamamoto, "Our guns could reach 30,000 feet, but accuracy was nearly impossible. We fired thousands of rounds per bomber downed." The B-29 seconds flew above effective ground defense, protected by altitude like armor. The B-29 campaign validated American strategic bombing doctrine through technological superiority. Altitude sanctuary enabled systematic destruction of Japan's industrial base without prohibitive losses. Atomic weapon delivery succeeded due to immunity from interception. The campaign proved that air power, backed by technology and industrial might, could achieve decisive results without invasion. The outcome was determined as much in American factories and engineering offices as in the skies over Japan, establishing precedents that would shape military aviation for generations.